Back with more NBA coverage, and naturally, I have to finish off talking about all of the trades that took place leading up to the trade deadline yesterday. We got to go all the way back to Wednesday. First, later in the day, after I recorded the last portion, it would be detailed that the Kings would actually trade Sidy Cissoko, sending him off along with 2 second-rounders to Washington, where the Wizards would then send away Jonas Valanciunas to that roster. Now, it's kind of interesting. I mean, you would have Valanciunas in this specific situation likely playing the full-on center. I mean, the thing with Domantas Sabonis is that he can play the power forward position if need be and produce at a similar rate compared to what he's been doing for most of this season. Jonas Valanciunas is a pure stretch five, though this particular season has seen him absolutely crumble from deep. I mean, this year, he goes from shooting 30.8% from three last season to just 25.9%. Now, you're hoping if you're Sacramento that he can pick that back up within your system, because likely he's going to be relocated to that and also a sort of post element. If Sabonis is not going to be doing it and be handling the ball most of the time, you're going to have somebody down low that would single out Valanciunas. Definitely has to get more accurate in that lens. I mean, 54.7% overall in terms of general field goal percentage is not necessarily the worst. You know, you just want to have him be able to space the floor. That was a specialty quite a long time ago, and with everybody that you have, you certainly can't get enough of it at this point. Like, every single person on that team should be able to make a shot if they're called upon to do so. The Pelicans would then trade away Daniel Theis and a 2031 second-round pick to the Thunder in exchange for cash. Just, a simple exchange in every sense of the imagination. The Thunder just add another pick to their arsenal. That's really it. And, I mean, Daniel Theis, honestly, I mean, it's not a player that they necessarily need to worry about. I mean, they could, if they really wanted to, I suppose that they could keep him, but I just don't really see him having a place on the roster, only if you had a player like Hartenstein or Holmgren, for that matter, get hurt again. Then we're talking about seeing Daniel Theis in an important role somewhat on the squad. But as of right now, I don't really see that happening. We would have to wait all the way until the night, ironically enough, during the halftime period of the Jazz-Warriors game that was played on Wednesday night, in which they blew a double-digit lead with just a few minutes left in the fourth quarter, and ultimately the Jazz won that game 131 to 128. That's besides the point, okay? The move would be made during the middle of the game, and damn, it had some effects on different players in there, I'm not gonna lie. So the Warriors would call Jimmy Butler's bluff and acquired him from the Heat. They would go on quite the spree as well in what would end up being a 4-team trade and nearly 5-team trade, because for whatever reason, like, multiple publications were saying that one of the players involved got traded to the Raptors or something, which wasn't necessarily confirmed. But nonetheless, they would send Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, and a projected first-round pick to the Heat. They would reroute Dennis Schroeder to the Jazz. They would reroute Lindy Waters III and to the Detroit Pistons. And they would also have the Jazz send PJ Tucker to the Heat. The Heat would send over Josh Richardson to the Pistons. And shortly after that, you would also have Jimmy Butler sign a 2-year, $112 million extension, keeping him there until at least 2027, if he so chooses. Now, there's actually a lot more given how many times different players involved in this thing got rerouted. But I'll go at face value with the straight-up trade. For the Heat side of things, they get a quality player in Andrew Wiggins, who is a little younger than Jimmy Butler. You know, he'd been having a little bit of a down season this year, especially compared to all of what he had been able to do with the Warriors up to this point. I mean, 17.6 points per game is not necessary. Like, it's an uptick, but it felt like even with what he was able to do from three, one of the better percentages of his career from deep this year, but the team just wasn't getting anywhere, and they figured that pretty much anything was on the line. Anybody outside of Stephen Curry for the Warriors could get moved at a moment's notice. And, you know, when you're taking on a contract like Jimmy Butler's, you have to be able to get the money right and make sure that you don't necessarily incur any penalties with any of the aprons as a part of the new CBA. You don't want those problems. So Wiggins' contract was definitely large enough to try to make this work. And, you know, you had to make things a little more enticing by adding a guy like Kyle Anderson in there, who can also give you pretty good defense compared to some of the other players they have over there right now. I think Wiggins could do well in there. And most importantly for the Heat, you just end this madness. No more worrying about Jimmy Butler this, Jimmy Butler that. You are now able to try and make something of your season. Try to flourish in this moment. Because, let's be completely real about the situation. They, as I said before, had already been doing some great work as a collective before this trade went through. You know, you have gotten solid contributions from the likes of a young Kel'el Ware as a rookie coming in, doing what he's doing for you and emerging as a talent. It gives potentially more reps to Tyler Hero. I mean, you're not, like, in his younger years, because the Timberwolves were so just terrible, Andrew Wiggins needed to be the lead guy. And he was in a situation where he did all these great things from an individual standpoint for the Timberwolves, but it never amounted to anything because they were never real contenders. The Warriors' experience for Andrew Wiggins, obviously pairing that up with, you know, the fact that he won championship in 2022 with the squad while giving them just exceptional defense all playoffs long and being quite the spark in that overall run. I mean, you know, 16.5 points per game doesn't look like a lot, but dude, when the time came for it, he stepped up more often than not, and I think Warriors fans should very much be thankful for Andrew Wiggins with that. But it taught him something. It taught him that he does not necessarily, in order to contribute to a winning culture, he can be a player that defers to others. He is quite the teammate and had been quite the teammate since he'd been with Golden State. I have no reason to believe that will change once he becomes a part of this team. Chemistry will take some sorting out. I mean, you're likely going to have him directly in place of where Jimmy Butler was. But he's not going to necessarily need to control the offense. Now, he'll definitely be able to get his own shot every now and then. But he's not going to be providing all of this drama. He's a very low-key player. And you compare that to Jimmy Butler's personality? I mean, granted, Jimmy Butler would not be Jimmy Butler without the personality he possesses, but to get a player who's solid enough to give you a good 17 points per game while allowing your other superstars to continue shining night in and night out doesn't seem like a bad get, especially with where this ship was headed. Because, it could have gotten way worse from here. As far as the Warriors go, I was shocked that they were willing to extend him so quickly. I did not even think they had the capital to incur a contract extension like that. In terms of his fit on the team, I mean, it just gives the defense another offensive player to account for. Now, granted, in the regular season, he's nowhere near the offensive player that he has been in his playoff runs, which is definitely an upside to this trade. He always elevates his game in the playoffs. The uncertainty with that comes with age. He's 35 right now. How much longer can we truly expect to have a playoff Jimmy sort of uptick in the postseason? It's not always that bankable, and it's not always that simple. You know, certain things can happen in certain points of time. So there's no guarantee with that. And then also, the second that something doesn't go right in Golden State with different players on the team or different coaches, who's to say that he would not be willing to commit some of the same actions that he did in Miami that eventually got him out of there. And on all the other past teams he's been on, every single time. Whether it's the incidents with him and coaches in the Bulls tenure ending that one, whether it's the infamous practice and subsequent interview with Rachel Nichols in Minnesota that ended his tenure there, the whole Tobias Harris debacle and dislike for Ben Simmons and shit in Philly that ended his tenure there, just a constant cycle with him. Who's to say it won't continue? You don't really know. But in either case, man, Curry needs help. And this is the best you could get to an extent. So from that perspective, I do understand it. And especially when you see what Curry's been going through. Like, he's not getting space. He's not getting space. They are trying their hardest to play laser-tight defense on him. And, he has, over the past couple of games, gotten 30 points. But it's been a struggle. I mean, just last night, you have him playing against the Lakers, and it takes him 35 shots and a litany of free throws to get to 37 points on the night. Now, granted, the game got close. The Lakers still won because LeBron put up a damn 42 points, 17 rebound, and 7 assists. Double-double performance. But that's neither here nor there. Okay? it is what it is. You know, you have to take a chance on somebody to complement Stephen Curry's game. Chemistry with this will certainly take a little bit. I mean, especially when you have Draymond Green around, and you know that both of them honestly act in a similar manner, Green and Butler. So that's going to be fun to sort out for the first few games of this stretch. But I can only hope that it pays off. As for the rest of this trade, oh boy. Kyle Anderson was rumored to have been rerouted to the Raptors. I don't know how true that is. But, hey, I guess time will tell. If I manage to see a Raptors game at some point, chances are that's probably not going to fucking happen, actually. But if I go track a Raptors game or so, and I see that Kyle Anderson's there, well, we'll know it's true. Dennis Schroeder would be sent to the Jazz initially. But the Jazz have such a streak of just buying out every single player that comes their way. So they elected to reroute him to the... They elected to reroute him to the Pistons. That would make it to where he was traded 4 times in the span of 24 hours. He was initially sent to go to the Heat. They sent him away to Utah. Utah didn't want him, so now he's back. He is in Detroit. To, I guess, honestly, with Jaden Ivey being out for just a little bit more time, not as bad of a rental as one might suggest. I mean, that, you know, Dennis Schroeder is certainly getting passed around like a blunt, don't get me wrong, but honestly, this could be a solid move for the Pistons. You know, you're trying to capitalize off of one of the more successful seasons you've had in quite some time. So you definitely need to make the most of it, and why not get a capable replacement for Jaden Ivey in Dennis Schroeder? I mean, even with his tenure in Golden State, you know, while it may not have necessarily been enough for a team trying to contend for a championship or so, at the very least, it could keep you honest as a team before you get Jaden Ivey back from injury. I think that's a fair way to look at that. The Jazz would also send PJ Tucker to the Heat, as I stated, because they didn't want him. But now the Heat, after having PJ Tucker before on the team that made the 2020 NBA Finals, they said enough of that shit. We don't want his ass again either. So they elected to reroute him over to Toronto, trading him a second rounder in cash there for Davion Mitchell. Another capable defender, but expect him to play strictly off the bench. Because if you have to give him legitimate minutes, you will be in offensive hell. He just can't do it. It doesn't even matter about his height or anything like that. He can't. He cannot generate points. He can't facilitate. He can't really shoot that effectively from what I've seen over the course of his entire career. And honestly, I don't know why that would even remotely change now with a change of setting. I know Heat culture this, Heat culture that. The man is 26 years old. Right? He has basically been a below league average shooter for most of his career. I guess 35.9% from 3 is not the worst, but still, just in 24 minutes of play, just 6.3 points. Like, you're not going to expect too much from him. So I just would not go that route. That's all I'm saying. The Raptors would continue to get active as the night went on because they decided to trade away Bruce Brown Jr., Kelly Olynyk, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick to the Pelicans for none other than Brandon Ingram. And my goodness, this blew my mind. It did. It did. And there was a little bit of shock there, but honestly, I think a good amount of that emotion, to be real, was just disappointment. I think it's disappointment, to be honest. Especially for the Pelicans side of things. But I will... Let's just put it like this, okay? Brandon Ingram had essentially been your co-star alongside Zion Williamson for how long? You quite literally are trading away a player that is supposedly a franchise co-star alongside Zion Williamson. And you only managed to get back a player in Bruce Brown Jr. who, when plays, is good defensively, but had regressed overall this season and then hasn't even really played all that much. Not to mention Kelly Olynyk, he's getting up there in age, and you don't see a lot of production out of him, though he can stretch the floor every now and then. You get a 33-year-old center after trading away Daniel Theis. At that point, what was the point of moving Daniel Theis in the first place? To take on somebody like that. And you do get some picks back, but my goodness, the way that Brandon Ingram supposedly was, you would have thought that the Pelicans could get back a lot more in return for him. To come away with that seems lackluster and, like I said, disappointing from that perspective. Like, I literally cannot explain that. It is mind-boggling to me how badly they bungled this. Seriously. And while it could be a solid move for the Raptors as well, let me tell you this right now. Right fucking now. The starting lineup for that squad, clunky. Absolutely clunky. Quite literally. There's no other way to say it. Grady Dick is going to be hurt by this move. He started in every single game he's played this season at the shooting guard small forward position, and he's been fairly productive. But he's going to have to be relegated to the bench because you're not putting a player like Brandon Ingram on the bench. He has too much talent, supposedly. So you have no choice but to start him. And what it looks like from my perspective, you're going to have a starting lineup of Emmanuel Quickley at the 1, RJ Barrett at the 2, Brandon Ingram at 3, even RJ Barrett at... Yeah. Brandon Ingram at the 3, Scotty Barnes at the 4. And then I guess Chris Boucher Jakob Poeltl at the 5. If they don't give Boucher the nod on certain nights. I mean, he hasn't started in a single game this season. But okay. Let's break that down for a second, shall we? Emmanuel quickly. R.J. Barrett. Brandon Ingram. Scotty Barnes. Jakob Poeltl. Who's spacing? Who's going to space in that starting lineup? Yes, Emmanuel quickly in his 12 games has shot 36.8% from 3. And that's such a small sample size. Who is genuinely going to space the floor effectively for this team? As decent of a season as Scotty Barnes has been having, we going consistently about the fact that he should be increasing his efficiency from beyond the arc. But we can let it slide a little bit because he's a bit of a point forward at this point. He can get you buckets when he needs to, and he can also facilitate his ass off. His 6.4 assists actually leads, 6.4 assists lead the team over the course of this season. So he can definitely get that job done. R.J. Barrett and Brandon Ingram in the same starting lineup. Like, I kid you not. Do they not play a similar brand of basketball? Literally. You're not expecting either of them to facilitate or play make. We talking about pure shot makers. And they're not always the most effective at doing that. Neither of them. They're both from Duke, too. It's like, I don't know. Like, they're going to be occupying some of the same spots on the court. I mean, I will see R.J. Barrett take more slashes to the rim for layups. But both of them absolutely love to get down and dirty in the mid-range and exploit smaller matchups on smaller shooting guards and small forwards respectively. That's where they occupy most of their offense. So how in the hell do they expect that to gel together? I don't see it right now. Now, yes, when healthy, he has the potential to do just fine. But health has become a problem for Brandon Ingram now. It has. Not to mention that he has yet to play even over 65 games in a season since his rookie year, which at this point would make him ineligible for any potential award if he was ever up for one. And that's the thing with him as well. You know, the talent is there. The numbers will tell you that he's a very good player. But he has not truly accomplished much of anything, if we're being incredibly honest. Most of these Lakers and Pelicans teams were uncompetitive. And then in the one opportunity he would get after 2021 to show what he was made of, he crumbled. They got swept by the Thunder, and it was largely due to his play. They were absolutely atrocious. I mean, 14.3 points per game, 25% from 3, and 34.5% from the field in that series to suffer the early exit. So I don't know. Like, are you just trying to... Honestly, yes, you're trying to be better in the regular season, obviously. You can't get much worse than 16-35. Yes, you can. But I don't know how far they really believe they can get with Ingram there. There's going to have to be a retooling of some sort. Because I don't know. It feels like they would try to stick with R.J. Barrett and Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, especially Scotty Barnes. I mean, that should be your franchise player at this point, but I just don't see that gelling together. And I honestly expect them to continue to crumble for the rest of this NBA season. I don't know how things get truly better because I still have yet to really hear anything about a specific timeline for Brandon Ingram's potential return. And even by that point, the Raptors are just going to continue to drop games. So this is going to be something that for both teams takes a little while to make some sense. But I figure that if, Brandon Ingram just comes over and continues to deal with health problems while also, I guess just putting up empty numbers, well, I suppose that the Pelicans would be better off for it in the long run. But we just have to see. There's really no way to gauge this right now. The Bulls would sign Lonzo Ball to a $20 million contract over the course of the next 2 years with a $10 million salary on average. It's a loyalty thing. It's certainly a loyalty thing. Now, don't get me wrong. He's been solid in his return since the injury that has kept him out for multiple seasons. But, you're not going to find too many players that, will average what he's averaging right now with 7.2 points per game and 36% shooting from the field along with 34% from deep. And this is off the bench, too. He's only started in 9 games. I mean, granted, you're fighting back from a lot there. They're trying to work him back into things, really. So, honestly, it could be worth it. But I can understand if people are questioning the move. And honestly, $10 million for any role player in this day and age, to this point, for those on, I guess, a sort of lower end or those under the radar guys that tend to give you good minutes off the bench or tend to contribute to your team really well, that's kind of a steal. So I would just give it that time. Give them a full season to work with, and I can almost assure that it'll make sense. No, not too many problems with that. The Lakers would do it again. They would continue to get active. And honestly, this one, it kind of surprised me. I see why they would do it. And honestly, with their return, they're fine with this, I guess. The Lakers would trade Dalton Knecht, Cam Reddish, a 2031 first rounder, and a 2030 first round pick for none other than Mark Williams, sending all of that, including the pick swap, to the Charlotte Hornets. It makes so much goddamn sense, man. I mean, when you look at a player like Dalton Knecht, he's come right in and he's been one of the better rookies that the draft has had to offer this season. You're sending him to a Hornets team that is certainly in the bottom half of overall efficiency from beyond the arc. Now, granted, he's going to be starting on the bench, but I think any player that can help you get up from 27th in the league in three-point percentage as an offense will certainly be of benefit to you. And I guess that's what the Hornets were looking for exactly by settling on a player like that. Also, Cam Reddish can give you solid defense as well. And, taking a flyer on him, granted, he's had his inconsistencies over the years, but even he, when he's on, can do good work from beyond the arc as well. And again, a player that to this point is only 25 years old. He'll be 26 later on. In spot minutes, he can provide that intensity for you that some of the other players on the team may not even be able to offer right now. So I think it's a solid move to take a chance on him. As far as the picks go, Charlotte will certainly find that those picks could mean something to them. So we'll see. As far as Mark Williams goes, though, this fit is just crazy. Now, granted, he is not a player that can space the floor, and Anthony Davis wasn't either. But he can do a little bit of what Anthony Davis does, especially when it comes to getting lobs and working in the interior. At his core, oh yeah, he's definitely been great at that. His efficiency did take a little bit of a dive this year, but it has seen him get more contributions than he had ever before. On a similar pace in terms of overall minutes played, though he's just at 58.6% shooting from the field, he has reached his highest amount of points per game in 15.6, while also averaging a career high in rebounds with 9.6. And some of the last few games have seen him log at least 20 points and 10 rebounds. He also had a 30-point ball game earlier in the season as well. So, this could certainly get interesting. The thing with him is that he has only played 85 total games in 3 seasons. Never even logging more than 43. That mark coming in his very first season. And, we said that Anthony Davis always struggled with health. Well, you have that on steroids if you're missing that much time that early on. But if they can get that sorted out, they're actually going to have something fucking crazy over there in Los Angeles. And I just continue to wallow in fear, absolute fear, of the potential that they have. I mean, either combination of Luka or LeBron being able to feed him the ball in the post or hit him on a good lob, along with all the other skills that both of those guys offer. Austin Reeves is still there, so he'll definitely be a player getting involved in that a little bit as well. It's crazy. All right, the Celtics yesterday morning would trade Jaden Springer, a 2027 second rounder and a 2030 second rounder to Houston for a 2031 second rounder. This is Jaden Springer we're talking about. Just got spot minutes for the Celtics, and honestly, this move would probably see him enter the G League because I don't know how the Rockets are really going to make it work with him. I mean, he's a young player, don't get me wrong, but they have quality talent. I mean, if Cameron Whitmore and Reed Shepherd can be on two-way contracts in between the the G League and the NBA, then I don't see how. I don't see a world in which he gets playing time. It's crazy. So he may be sent down there with those two. All right, the Wizards would trade Jared Butler, a 2027 second rounder, a 2028 second rounder, and 2 2030 second rounders for Reggie Jackson and a 2026 first rounder in their trade with the 76ers. They're fully embracing the rebuild, by the way. They are. They anticipate that they're going to be very bad over the next couple of seasons. A 2025 first rounder would do them better here, but to be honest, I think they already have that in possession just because of how bad they already are. So to try to lock up that capital for the next season is kind of smart from the Wizards' perspective. You know you ain't going anywhere, so you may as well try to build through the draft with reasonable levels of capital. What better way to do that than to secure a first round pick that you'll have a fighting chance for? Like, literally. It comes down to odds, so there's quite literally a small chance that they won't get it. But, hey, what are you going to do? All right? And Reggie Jackson, don't expect Reggie Jackson to do anything with this team. Don't expect it. Just don't. I kid you not. The fact that this man won a championship in 23 with the Nuggets is absolutely insane. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, he did fine with them. But honestly, given what Russell Westbrook has been able to do with them in an even better way, I should say, you can scoff at that. No wonder they sent him to the 76ers. I mean, even in spot minutes for them, he's putting up just 4.4 points per game and just 1.5 assists in 12 minutes of play on horrible efficiency. So they're actually about to be bad. How is the fit going to be? I mean, I guess they're going to start him alongside Jordan Poole. Oh boy. They do that, that's going to be drastic. That's going to be very bad. I mean, like, literally. But again, you're electing to go in some direction. The 76ers getting Jared Butler as well for the short term is good because, again, you need as many bodies as you can get out there. You can't necessarily bank on Jared McCain at all. I mean, he unfortunately got injured, even though he was doing that well for y'all. He's hurt. You can't do anything about that. Caleb Martin was out with injury for a while as well, and they eventually moved him. So now you have multiple guards in Quentin Grimes and Jared Butler able to take on some reps. You just need to fill up the team. Because you can't keep on trying to play under man. It's not going to help you. The Hornets would trade away Cody Martin, Vasilija Micic, and a 2026 second rounder to Phoenix in exchange for Jusuf Nurkic from the Suns and a 2026 first rounder as well. It works well for both sides. I mean, if anything as well, it completes the cycle of their initial trade for Nick Richards. So this is quite literally a full circle moment. I mean, let's just call it what it is. Jusuf Nurkic is a total bum. He is a total bum. Nigga literally got played out of the rotation. You mean to tell me that you can get back a second round pick for that guy along with... I mean, the players are not necessarily anything to write home about, but Micic is a capable facilitator in spot minutes, so he could shore up your second unit and get the ball out of Bradley Beal's fucking hands. But he does have efficiency issues. When it comes to Cody Martin as well, he is kind of a polar opposite, I would suppose. He struggles to generate offense, though he can give you some layups every now and then. He does not shoot the three ball well in comparison to the peak of Caleb Martin's powers. And he certainly plays defense, but I guess it's not necessarily as highlighted like they have done for Caleb. So, the players are fine, but the fact that you can even get rotational pieces back for a dude that was out of your lineup effectively is actually pretty fucking good. So you got to give the Suns credit there. Also, for them, the Hornets, to get back a first-round pick continues to enhance the weight of their rebuild as well. And, I mean, Nurkic, just, I don't see him really changing his ways. Like, you know, he is exactly what he is. But you know what? He may be serviceable enough for them for a very short amount of time. The Bucks had a few more players involved in the initial trade from earlier on Wednesday, with the Wizards that sent Chris Middleton and Kyle Kuzma. Well, Chris Middleton to Washington in exchange for Kyle Kuzma. They also managed to swap Patrick Baldwin Jr. to the Suns, the Spurs after that trade went through, while also acquiring Jericho Sims from New York in, I guess, a 3-team trade. And Delon Wright was sent to the Knicks in exchange for that. Jericho Sims is not necessarily consistent enough for my liking. I mean, he could be a solid backup power forward. He offers just a little more size in that aspect. As a center, he's a bit undersized. So you're probably going to play him there. As far as Delon Wright goes, I mean, you know, like, you already have Cameron Payne, you already have Jalen Brunson. You're set. You're just trying to fortify your bench. I don't see how Delon Wright does that for you, but so be it. The Hawks would make a really interesting move leading up to the trade deadline yesterday, though. They would trade DeAndre Hunter to the Cavs in exchange for Caris LeVert, George Niang, 3 second-round picks, and 2 pick swaps as well. I think that is a win-win deal. I said it shortly after all of the details were released. I absolutely love the move. I think for Atlanta, you are looking to get back draft capital in a situation like this. And they built a solid second half of the draft here with what they've been given. George Niang can certainly, like, honestly, I mean, they were teammates. George Niang is kind of like Cedi Osman in that sense. I mean, you know, he can definitely space for you every now and then. He's not consistent enough to get starting level minutes, but, you know, he off the bench, he can be a fairly productive player. For the Cavs, though, I mean, oh my goodness. You know, DeAndre Hunter deserved to get moved to a team that can utilize the best of his services. I mean, this man, because, you know, they elected to go with the experiment of having him come off the bench, you know. He had gone through woes as a starter, and it wasn't working for them. So they figured they should probably go on and try something new. And surely enough, they bring him off the bench where, I kid you not, he has been having a really good season that does not necessarily get a lot of attention because the Hawks are so mediocre. And because, you know, Jalen Johnson as a starter had been doing relatively well also. But 19 points per game for him is a career high. He's also shot 39.3% from three-point line this year, also a career high. As a sixth man. That's great work. And the Cavs are in a really great position. You know, you may want to go on and start him, in all honesty, because in reality, just make sure about this. Okay, Isaac Okoro had been injured, but I think that even when he gets back, it feels like DeAndre Hunter would assume that role and Isaac Okoro could come off the bench. Or do you keep the spark going? Do you fortify that bench by leading or having DeAndre Hunter lead that unit? It's an embarrassment of riches, and you can do whatever you want there. For Caris LeVert to go to, it makes sense. Caris LeVert is no slouch either. In fact, for quite a while there, and I think this is a really good point to make, you could argue that Caris LeVert was doing similar things to DeAndre Hunter, honestly. We're talking about players that can come off the bench and give you bursts of scoring in that aspect, while also being a good all-around player when you need them to. He'd certainly been that. The Nets definitely needed it when he was there. And, he had gotten some reps at starter for the Pacers. In fact, the majority, pretty much all of his games with the Pacers for that stretch were starts, where he produced relatively fine. So who's to say that, again, the Hawks, 10.2 points per game off the bench doesn't necessarily compare, but he's shooting 45% from the field and 40.3% from three. The Hawks could do a similar thing now. To get two players back for the price of one really good one, and one of them just happens to be somewhat similar to DeAndre Hunter. That's tremendous move for the Hawks in that lens. And should definitely fortify a Cavs team that is already tops in the Eastern Conference. That just makes them even stronger overall. The Clippers would trade Terrence Mann and Bones Highlands to the Hawks for Bogdan Bogdanovic and 3 second-rounders. There's a great chance that Caris LeVert will probably start. Terrence Mann as a bench piece is excellent, but he had not necessarily played a ton this season for the Clippers. And you figured it was best to just cut your losses, so to move on from him makes sense. Bones Highland is also another case where, again, just fell out of the rotation completely. If you can try to get anything out of that asset, it's going to do wonders for you. Bogdan Bogdanovic is, Bogdan Bogdanovic, let's just say he's a very interesting player. He's getting up there in age a little bit. And numbers this season would suggest that although he could be a capable sixth man for a team, and he has proven it in the past, this season has seen a tremendous drop-off for him. Nowhere near as efficient, averaging 10 points per game, but just 30.1% from three, by far the lowest of his career. And 37.1% shooting from the field is also the lowest of his career. Maybe he could rejuvenate that in Los Angeles, or maybe this is a sign of what's to come for him. The Clippers would hope for the former to be true. The Hawks would trade Cody Zeller and a 2028 second-round pick to Houston in exchange for the draft rights to one Alpha Kaba out of France. Apparently, the Rockets drafted him in 2017 and he has been stashed overseas ever since. The Hawks now have his rights. I don't know if they're going to bring him into the league, but just keep in mind that the dude is already 29 years old, without any true experience in the NBA. So it just seems like a very pointless move outside of, again, just securing a pick. Houston gets that, but yeah, I don't know about that. Like, why would the Hawks want to take that on? I don't understand. The Grizzlies would, at the buzzer, make quite the move. They would trade Marcus Smart and a first-round pick to the Wizards in exchange for multiple second-round picks. They would also send Jake LaRavia to Sacramento and acquire Johnny Davis from the Wizards. Along with Marvin Bagley III. The Kings would also send Kobe Jones and Alex Len to the Wizards. Marcus Smart is clearly the most important name here. And I mean, damn, he had been such a capable player for that long that I didn't think the Grizzlies would move on from him like that. But granted, I guess Marcus Smart was a temporary pawn in the overall timeline for the Grizzlies. From that lens, it makes sense. And, he could help the Wizards out defensively, but at this point, can anything really save the Wizards outside of, again, potentially building through the draft? I don't know. Also, when it comes to him, though, he's played a few games this season. He'd been out for most of the time due to injury. His efficiency doesn't really offer a whole lot of hope on the offensive side of the ball. So, but again, I guess the Wizards are embracing it, so it is what it is. Johnny Davis and Marvin Bagley III aren't going to do shit with the Grizzlies, by the way. Especially Johnny Davis. Something tells me that they may try to incorporate Marvin Bagley III as a deep bench piece. Especially with them moving on from Jake LaRavia and sending him to Sacramento. Which kind of surprised me in essence. I mean, from what I see, Jake LaRavia and Keegan Murray fit the same roles. But in reality, with what he's been able to do this season off the bench, it made sense that his value is increasing a little bit. So, given that he's a player who is young, but not necessarily as important as some of the other guys, and especially, in comparison to a guy like Brandon Clark, who had been there for a little bit and is stronger on defense, probably fits a Kevin Huerter role for the Kings, to be honest. So, seems like a fair chance to take on him. 7.3 points per game, with 49% shooting from the field and 44.4% from three beyond the arc. He's 23-year-old and just turned 23. Definitely a fresh player. And, standing at 6'8", 235, be a very capable very capable shooter, I should say. Even though he's a power forward, definitely use him in a sharp shooting role. Similar way that, again, a guy like Kevin Huerter or even Doug McDermott is getting utilized for them. Kobe Jones and Alex Len are also just going to add to the madness. But, it's homecoming for Alex Jones. He had been a Wizard before. Oh, yeah, and to reroute back just a little bit before moving on to these last couple of moves, it should be noted right here, right now, that Jimmy Butler and Mike Dunleavy Jr. were teammates. The very man who introduced Jimmy Butler at the press conference the very day after they traded for him was actually his teammate for 3 seasons between 2013 and 2015. Just an interesting tidbit to think about there. The last couple of moves would see the Clippers trade Kevin Porter Jr. to the Bucks and get MarJon Beauchamp back. Now, they had gotten Kevin Porter Jr. back in the league from Greece. Definitely showing some of the same deficiencies he had when he was once a sort of rising star in the league. But I guess for the Bucks as a bench piece, may not necessarily be the worst. Just don't expect him to start at all. I wouldn't count on it. They are going to struggle if he is. And I mean, MarJon Beauchamp, though he could be a quality player, he hadn't really gotten a lot of burn. The Clippers may be able to work something out with him. Especially if Bogdan Bogdanovic can't rejuvenate his career and his ability to shoot the three ball there. Could be the next man up. The Pacers would then finally trade James Wiseman to Toronto for cash. But Toronto waived him a few hours afterwards. I mean, he remains a free agent, and he is yet another interesting player. The Warriors made the grand decision to take a chance on him, and, quite interesting in retrospect. But in reality, I figured that if the Raptors would have kept him, he wouldn't have necessarily been able to play this season. He's dealing with an Achilles injury right now, but I mean, it would have been a pretty low-risk situation. And honestly, I think that this would spell the end of James Wiseman's career. I mean, you are sitting here and telling me that a team as bad as the Raptors, who only have Jakob Poeltl as a true center there right now, don't opt to get a younger option off the bench and take a flyer on a player who was the former number 3 overall pick in the 2020 NBA draft. Instead, they let him go because they cannot bear having him on their team. At that point, that's when you know it's up. But I mean, literally, this is a man who, I just don't know how anybody could fall for it. Injuries were always a problem with him as well, but this man did not play. He essentially didn't play college basketball. Played just a few games in college. How could anyone have really expected his game to translate into the pros? And now, at the age of, I believe, 24, he may very well have to give the game up. I don't know if there's a way back for James Wiseman right now. Oh, he's 23. He will be 24 soon. I don't see him coming back from this. It's just impossible for me to really look at that with a straight face and tell everyone that he could find a way. He's literally only played a game this season. It may literally be done. Literally. That'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.